Okay. So yeah, as you said, I'm Executive Director of the jQuery Foundation. So what I wanted to talk about is a number of the things that we're doing or wanting to do or trying to partner with folks to do to really emphasize open source being for everyone. And that's from a few different points of view. So with that, we'll kind of dive in. That's where you can get a hold of me. I'm Kris Borchers pretty much everywhere. Twitter, GitHub, Gitter, IRC. Yeah, so feel free to reach out. Questions about this talk, questions about the jQuery Foundation, questions about open source, getting involved, whatever. Or come talk to me when we go have drinks, which I will try to get us out of here so we can. All right, so yeah, so when I say open source is for everyone, I want to kind of approach that from these three sort of points of view. So consuming, contributing, and contact was a really bad word, but I wanted them all to all have C. But really, reach kind of makes more sense, and I'll explain that in a second. So when we talk about consuming, that's obviously the use of open source. So using open source projects and the idea that they should always be free, always be available to everyone. And yeah, contributing, obviously getting involved in open source. So providing opportunities for anyone, no matter where they're coming from, where they're at, their experiences, they are able to get involved in the projects that we host, and we try to spread that to the projects that we don't control. And then reach is this idea of using open source to reach more people. So being able to build your applications in a way that reaches more people. So we provide some projects that I'll talk about to help you reach more people through open source. So, like I said, I'm the Executive Director of the jQuery Foundation, so I would not be doing my job if I didn't talk a little bit about the foundation. The mission is really in line with what I'm talking about today, so that's what it is. I'm not going to read it, but basically the idea is making the open web accessible to everyone, keeping it free, and providing tools and resources to help facilitate that. And we are a nonprofit, a 501c6 nonprofit. That means we are member supported. These are our three sort of top diamond level members, so I always like to throw a little shout out their way, because they do a lot for us, both financially as well as they provide a lot of developer time into some of our projects. They give us a lot of guidance and help us make connections in different ways to help advance that mission. So coming back to the mission, there's these three pieces of it that I want to highlight. The fact that it's accessible for everyone, development and support, and collaboration. And those actually map really well to those three sort of overarching topics that I wanted to talk about today. So it really, I was kind of using our mission as kind of the basis for this talk. So when we talk consuming open source, I like this GIF because it's 38 seconds long, and it shows sort of the ultimate in consuming open source, because I think this project is consuming all of open source. It just keeps going, and I've watched it so many times, I've actually noticed that it's like, I mean, and it's the classic NPM problem. It's installing many things over and over again. It's installing projects that are completely redundant. So yeah, but yeah, so that's the idea. We're talking about consuming projects in what you're building. And so when we talk about projects, the jQuery Foundation has a number of open source projects that we sort of shepherd and make sure are available, make sure they stick around, make sure they're supported for the people that depend on them. But recently we increased that number of projects because we merged with the Dojo Foundation. I don't know if anyone was aware of that, but about this month we kind of finalized that. And so what that means, we had been talking for quite a long time. we knew, obviously, that each other existed. We had pretty much the same mission. We did a lot of the same things. We supported a lot of very interrelated projects. So it just made sense for us to come together and sort of merge those efforts. So the jQuery Foundation had these projects, which a number of them you're probably familiar with. Some you may not be, but I'll touch on some of them in a little bit. But once we merged with the Dojo Foundation, now we have a lot more. And so the idea there is just to try to take projects that are really important to the web, really important to open source, and make sure that they live in a neutral place like an open foundation so that they're not vendor controlled, they're not at the whim of some person that could just decide to get rid of them. And so you'll see a number of projects that you probably recognize or use. The one cool thing is, going back to the previous talk, Tessel is a jQuery Foundation project now. They had joined the Dojo Foundation not too long ago to make sure that their project stayed open. And so they open source both sort of the software side and the hardware. So even all of the schematics to build the board itself are open source, which is really cool. And yeah, so like she was saying, it's only $35. Go buy it because we get a royalty. It's very small. It's more about the project itself, which is really cool. I got to play with it this past weekend. All right, and then I like to just throw up these stats because they're pretty cool. Like, people always talk about, oh, I don't need jQuery. I use Angular or Ember or whatever, and that's cool. If jQuery is not for everyone, you don't need it. But obviously, some people still need it. 16% of the internet needs it, and 17,000 requests a second for it. And then also Lodash, which you may be familiar with, which is an awesome utility library for working with like arrays and sort of low-level stuff, is the most depended upon project on NPM. And that is also now a jQuery Foundation project. So we're all about providing things that people can consume and making sure they stick around because obviously a lot of people depend on them. Including some of those projects that people say, we don't need the jQuery Foundation because it's only about jQuery, but Angular uses Grunt, which is a jQuery Foundation project. So does Cordova, so does React. WordPress and Bootstrap both use jQuery. And the one on the bottom right is actually Falcor. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but that's a new project coming out of Netflix, which is it's a Node library, but they use Lodash in some of the stuff that they do. So we're everywhere. So now moving from consuming over to contributing, and I love this quote. It's kind of been called Joy's Law, right? So no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else. And I try to keep that in mind. I try to make sure our projects keep that in mind, and that you may have some really smart people that you work with. You may be a really smart person, but there's a lot more really smart people out there. And so if we can find ways to bring those people together through open source, then everybody wins, because now instead of competing and building the same things and fighting over whose is better, if we can concentrate that effort, it's just better for everyone in the end. So 3 things that I kind of want to touch on with contributing is that the jQuery Foundation works on is providing opportunities, engagement, or encouragement, I'm sorry, providing a safe environment, and then building community through collaboration. So when I talk about providing opportunities, encouragement, so that's all of our projects, for one. We encourage people to get involved in our projects. If you think something's missing or something's broken, we want people to jump in and help us fix them. So we really try to encourage people not just to let us know what's wrong, but actually jump in and help us fix it. We also host events and license events all over the world. And we try to get a number of our projects represented there to make sure that the folks that are attending can have some of that hands-on time with the people that work on the projects that they use, and can really have a better chance of actually getting involved in the project because they're able to talk one-on-one with those folks. And an example of that is actually just this weekend. I actually just flew back in late yesterday. We did a developer summit in New York. And what we did was we partnered with these organizations to help focus the event on bringing people from underrepresented groups into open source. And so Women of Color in Tech Chat, Manhattan JS, Girl Develop It, and Coalition for Queens all helped us out, reached out to their communities to get people to come out and attend or talk, and it was an amazing event. We had about 50 attendees, so not big. We're trying to make these very intimate. So we had about 50 attendees, about 40 project representatives, so it was almost a one-to-one, and we got a lot of hands-on time with folks for 2 days, getting them over those hurdles of like setting up their environment or silly things that some of us that have been doing this for so long don't think about anymore that actually is a barrier for people to actually get involved. And so we try to make sure our projects stay aware of the fact that there are people just starting out and need some help. And so this was a great event. We had a number of people brand new to open source actually getting commits into some of our projects over the weekend. People are still on the Gitter channel for the sort of test project we created, talking through things, talking about different pull requests they're sending. So it's really amazing. So the second one was providing a safe environment, and I'm really proud of Corey Frang took the lead and pulled together a group of folks from the foundation to actually create a foundation-wide code of conduct. So we've had codes of conduct at our events for a long time, but we thought that it would be a really good idea to have a code of conduct for any interaction with the jQuery Foundation. So, so whether it's working on our projects or attending our events or just coming in and talking on an IRC channel, our code of conduct covers all of that, and it gives people guidelines on how to treat each other and really makes it a safe environment where people can kind of not have to worry about some of the things that they do when they go on the internet, and know that this is a place where they can get involved and be a part of what we're doing. And then this one's kind of obvious and somewhat review of what we've been talking about, but the sort of building community through communication. So we have a number of channels, like I mentioned. We're all on IRC. A lot of our projects have their own IRC channels. They do their meetings in public on IRC. We have Gitter channels for, I think, all of the projects. We do all of our development out in the open on GitHub. There's nothing being built kind of behind the scenes. All of our bug reports and everything are done in public, whether it's GitHub issues or some use like Track or whatever else, but it's all out there. We don't have this secret set of issues that we're working on and we're ignoring the public. All of our websites are open source, so even if people find issues in the websites and how we're communicating, they can fix that. Same thing with the documentation, it's all on the web. And then of course our events, again, where we try to really pull the community together at these events. All right, so the last sort of big thing, big point that I wanted to cover is reach. And so a few facets of that we have been focusing on of late are accessibility, internationalization, and standards. And so when it comes to accessibility, jQuery UI and jQuery mobile, they've been around for a long time, but they're extremely accessible and are well known and still actually used quite widely because of their accessibility. Especially in like government projects and things like that, they're still being used quite heavily. But the point here, though, is that they've been focused on accessibility almost from the beginning, and trying to make sure that no matter who is using an application built on, say, jQuery UI, and how they're accessing that application, they'll be able to use it. We've also have one of our other members is DQ Systems, and they are a company completely focused on accessibility, and so we talk to them a lot, we partner with them a lot on different ways that we can be more accessible in our projects, as well as we're trying to figure out things that we can do in a more broad sense when it comes to accessibility on the web. And so we're talking to them as well as some folks from like the Paciella group, like Leonie Watson, and some others, to see what we can do there beyond just some of our projects being accessible. Similarly with internationalization, we have a couple of projects that focus on internationalization. And this is actually where I'll stop blabbing soon and show a little bit of code. So hopefully we'll end on a little bit more interesting note and something you can take away. But Globalize is one of our internationalization projects that's been on the jQuery Foundation side. Jed came over with from the Dojo side, and Globalize actually uses pieces that Jed used. We've been working together for a long time, but it does like message formatting, and so you can swap in translations. It does currency formatting, date formatting, number formatting, all of those types of things that are either slightly or very different in different locales, different countries. And then we also do a lot of work in standards bodies. So we have representation on a number of different W3C working groups. One of our projects called PEP is a pointer event polyfill. So that is basically it's a polyfill for the new pointer event standard, which unifies all of the input event models. So you don't have to manage mouse events and touch events and stylus events all separately. It brings them all into a single event model that is very similar to the mouse model, which everyone's familiar with. And the browsers are slowly implementing that, but until they do, PEP lets you write your code for that now, and then once they do implement it in all of the browsers, then you no longer need PEP. Similarly on the ECMA side, so ECMAScript is the actual name for Java that we all call JavaScript. And ECMA 402 is the standard around internationalization. So the lead of Globalize, Rafael Javier de Souza, he is also on the committee writing the second edition of ECMA 402. So a lot of the stuff that we've learned through Globalize is now going into the standard and will be part of the language itself. All right, so let's look at some code. So what I want to do now is kind of transition. So I'm staying on the reach topic. So what I want to do is show some of the things that we're trying to do with a project like Globalize to make it really easy for developers to take an application that they already have and reach more people with that application with as minimal development impact as possible. So what I'm going to take is a sort of simple shopping cart demo that was written with React, as well as React Router and Reflux. And I'll put a caveat on this. I am no longer really a developer. I like to pretend I'm still one. So I can't explain React to you. I can just kind of feel my way through it. But then also, so the shopping cart demo is written in React, and then we'll incorporate Globalize with a little add-on that I made for React called React Globalize that basically just bridges the two so that you can, it creates little placeholder React components that you can drop inside of your other React components, and it'll do like formatting of the data. So let's take a look at that. So this is the little demo. I didn't build this. I forked it from this project on GitHub called React Reflux Super Fantastic Shop Demo. And it's actually really nice. It's a pretty typical shopping cart thing. You can add things to the basket, increase them via the basket, decrease them via the basket. It keeps a running total, etc. It's a pretty nice demo for this, because what I want to do now is internationalize, localize all of those numeric values. So the currencies, the numbers themselves, both in terms of the item prices and the totals that are calculated, all of that. So what I have, so I made some changes and I kind of just put it into steps as branches, so I can just change to a new branch and it writes the code for me, so I don't have to live code. So step one, we can, let's see here. So we can kind of just look through the diffs. Hopefully, can everybody read that? Let's zoom maybe a little more. So really, all step one was adding Globalize and React Globalize, which then required me to upgrade React and React Router, which then meant I had to fix some things just a couple of minor things in the app that were slightly different due to the different version of React. So that's all step one was. So really, and that's what's running right now. So really, this is just running just like it was when I cloned it from the repo. It just also has Globalize available. So now if we check out step two and look at that diff, so I was practicing this earlier and I was like, wait, why did I remove those in step two? But I actually figured out that I actually need those as dependencies, not dev dependencies, so they just moved down. I also pulled in CLDR data, so that the one thing I didn't mention about Globalize is that it pulls all of its localization information from CLDR, which is like a huge universal repository of locale data. So you give it a locale like German or whatever, and it will give you back all of the information you need about that to format dates, format currencies, etc. Then this addition here is just adding Globalize and initializing it in my router, which is pretty straightforward. And then by default, we're just setting the locale to English. And so what we do now is we set an initial state. So by default, the data was all just in British pounds. So I went ahead and set the locale to English and the initial currency to the British pound. And then we'll work on changing that later. But so what this does is it just sets the initial state to, and we'll track the state and pass that down to our components, excuse me, to update them as we change our locale. And so that's what this is doing, is just passing the state on down through the different routes, down through the header. So this is the basket inside of our basket, and so this is where we instantiate Globalize as well as the format currency and format number components that I created in my React Globalize project. And so then we can use those here, for example. So this is showing the price of an item that's in the shopping cart or in the basket. So if I add one here, so this price here is now being formatted with Globalize via React Globalize by this. So basically the way React Globalize works is it's a React component, and you can send the locale and the currency through to the component, and then it takes the price or whatever data is in here, the number that's in here, and then localizes it based on the information you gave it about the locale. So that's the price of an item, and then a little bit further down, the quantity of the item, and then the actual basket total. And I think that's about it. This is just passing those properties down through the basket to the items in the basket. And this is passing it down through the items to each item in the catalog. And then this is the item in each catalog, and it's the exact same thing. We grab those components, and then we drop them in instead of just the static values. So here we format currency for the price of an item in the catalog, and here we format number for the quantity in the catalog. That should be about it. Yeah, and that's items as well. All right, cool. So again, this is actually, it automatically refreshes, but I can refresh here. So this is running on those changes, which everything works exactly the same, except for now, instead of hard-coded British pound symbols and hard-coded decimal places and things like that, it's all being created by Globalize. So if we take a look at the data, you can see, oops, I don't have that open. But the data for each item, like the price here is just 21. And so what Globalize is doing is taking that 21, converting it to 2 decimal places because we told it was currency, and then we told it was British pounds, so it put the pound symbol on. All right, so let's move to step 3. Here. All right, so you should see, yeah, so I have a process sitting over here just running and watching for changes, and then it refreshes for me. So we checked out step 3, and now you'll see that we've added some ways, and I'm obviously not a designer, so it's ugly, but we added a way to change our currency and our locale. And let's see if there's anything interesting or different to point out in this code. Yes, so what we had to do was add the ability to actually update the state. So again, not being a React expert, the way I understand it, the data flows one direction. So we update our state, and then that state flows down through the components and makes any updates to your views as necessary. So we're tracking our state for that. We saw that earlier with the locale and currency. And so then we just provide a way via those select menus to say, okay, this has changed, update the state, and then it will go through and update anything that's watching that state within our application. So that's pretty much what these are. So yeah, so this is creating a React component for the currency menu and providing a method to update the currency based on the value that you change it to. And then that just renders that menu. And then it's exactly the same for that locale menu. We just create it, have an update locale method or function, and yeah. And then it renders the select menu. I was looking at this earlier and I couldn't figure out why it says that changed. I probably removed a space or something. And then this is just where inside the header, we actually instantiate those currency menu and locale menus that we saw up in the upper right. And that's it. So now, what that gives us is we can say, all right, this is actually euros, and it changes the symbol to euros. Or if we say, well, I speak German, so change it to the Deutsch locale. What you'll see there is they actually use commas where in the US we use decimal points, and they use decimal points where we use commas. So it makes that change, and it also puts the currency symbol at the end, which is more typical for that locale. And it does all that for you with just those few minor changes. The thing you might notice is that it's not actually doing any currency conversion. That's because right now it's just doing formatting. And Globalize does not do any of the currency conversion. So I figured I would add that myself. So the other thing, before we get there, step 4 is actually, so I've changed it and I want euros and I speak German. But if I leave and come back, it goes back to British pounds and English. So I made some changes with step 4, and we don't need to go through the code on that because it's not relevant to what we're talking about, which is globalizing and internationalizing your app. But it persists to local storage. So now should see, so let's say we want US dollars and English, and we refresh, and it remembers that we made that choice because it's persisting in local storage. And so then the only other piece was the fact that the numbers didn't change, and 21 pounds is not $21, which is not 21 euros. So I just found a service online where you can make just a simple REST request, and it'll throw you back some exchange rates for the day, and added that in to the process. And so now, when it refreshes, so we'll see, like, instead of 21, this is 32.48, and we can add that to the basket, and it's keeping track of it in actual numbers. So if we go back to British pounds, everything kind of switches back, uses the exchange rate to change that. The one thing, because I did this, because I decided I needed to do this like a couple hours ago, I kind of cheated. And so it's just applying the exchange rate to the basket total as well. So if we say, so it works fine on the British pound because that's our base currency. And it says, so 3 of those is $63, or 2 of them is 42. But if we switch to US dollars, you'll see that 32.48 times 2 is not 64.97. There's slight rounding differences, but it's a demo. Yeah, so that's basically the demo. But the idea of that was showing that, like, I mean, like I said, I don't build things in React ever, but the Globalize API is really simple, and we're trying to provide little sort of connectors to be able to work our projects into things like that. So that little React Globalize library that I built makes that really easy with a React project. So much so that we actually have, Adobe is now working on working their stuff into Behance, working Globalize into Behance. Twitter is starting to use Globalize via React Globalize and some of the stuff they're doing. So, which is pretty cool because I just created that for fun like a few months ago, and now people are actually using it, so I have to pay attention and maintain it. But yeah, but the idea is we're trying to extend developers' reach through different projects that we provide, whether it's literal reach by internationalization or just providing as many free and open solutions so that you can focus on, you can create the app simply and then focus on bringing it to people. That's kind of all I had, but really, just to kind of circle back, like what the jQuery Foundation is focused on is really what all of us should be focusing on, which especially all of us that are involved in open source, and hopefully you are, and if you're not, talk to me. I'm sure I can find something for you to do, and it doesn't have to be writing code. That was another thing that we've really been trying to stress is we need, open source needs designers, open source needs writers, open source needs everything. I mean, whatever skills you have will be valuable in the open source world. And so that's what we're trying to stress and trying to get people to understand, is that similar to the robotics, like, you don't have to be a robotics expert to get involved. You don't have to be an open source expert to contribute to an open source project. You just have to have a passion for helping out, and we'll find something for you to do. So with that, I think that's